All right, Win editor Tristan Warner here again. We got another special guest joining us as we continue these video interviews for all the 2026 Win Magazine Award winners. Lucky to be joined today by Nate Naasz of the NWCA. Nate is the winner of this year's 2026 Win Magazine Journalist of the Year. And, from when I called Nate and told him this, his first reaction was, "Am I a journalist?" It's a little bit of a broad topic, but really anybody who's in the media is qualified. As if you look through the past winners of the Win Journalist of the Year, we've had photographers, we've had writers, we've had podcasters, we've had guys who run websites, we've had all kinds of good stuff. But Nate is somebody who is extremely involved behind the scenes, making a lot of things come to fruition for the National Wrestling Coaches Association. So without further ado, Nate, congratulations. How does it feel to be named Win's Journalist of the Year?
Well, thanks for having me on, Tristan. It's an absolute honor to win this award. After we talked, I went and looked at a lot of the previous winners, and to be in that company, it's very humbling. Like I said, I don't know if I consider myself a journalist, but I do get to work with a lot of great journalists such as yourself, a lot of photographers, videographers, and I always come away from every event on Media Row learning more than what I went in with. There's so much knowledge there, and the free flow of information between everybody. It's a really great community, and it's like a sub community. The wrestling community as a whole, it's fantastic. You and I have talked in the past. It's a
Yeah.
blessing to be able to work full time in wrestling, and to work with the wrestling media within that community. It's a real honor. So very, again, humbled, honored to receive this award. I think it's more of a testament to what the NWCA has
Yeah.
done for the last 98 years. Our executive director, Mike Moyer, has done a tremendous job growing the sport. And that's just what I want to do. I want to be an ambassador for the sport and continue to help grow at every level.
Yeah, absolutely. And you alluded to that nicely. I was going to ask a little bit about your background getting involved with the NWCA before we kind of dive into your role and what kind of contributions you make to wrestling on a daily, monthly, and yearly basis. Tell me a little bit about, obviously you're out in Kansas. You have a background wrestling, coaching, athletic director. You've worked with the KWCA as president, I believe. Just talk a little bit about, I guess, even pre NWCA, your background and contributions to the sport leading up to this role that you're in now.
Yeah, you mentioned I'm from Kansas. We do have some hills out here. Get beat up
Just a
quite a
couple.
bit when talking to you, Pennsylvania guys. Mount Sunflower in Kansas is higher than your tallest mountain in Pennsylvania. So I'll throw that out there. Just a little factoid. But yeah, I was a public educator. I still consider myself to be an educator through this role. I loved my time in the classroom. Spent 14 years. I was a high school and middle school business teacher, so I taught technology, and it's really cool to see all of the stuff that I was teaching kids to do to kind of unfold and unpack all of those different tools throughout my different roles here at the NWCA. So I really truly enjoyed my time in the classroom. Uh, I've got great relationships. I still, keep up with a lot of my former students and athletes. I was blessed to be able to sit in a wedding this past Friday night. One of my former athletes, who's now a coach, and you watch them and you see them, especially when they follow you into the profession, and it's always good when you see the good things that you said and the good things that you did being reflected in their
Yeah.
actions. Makes you stand up a little bit taller. Your heart grows a little bit, and it's just it was a great life. I truly enjoyed it. And you mentioned it. I was very active in Kansas on the KWCA board. Served as the academic chair, ended up being the vice president, and then the president. Did that for two different terms. So actually 8 years in total serving as either the president or vice president. And Also served as the NWCA state chair for Kansas, so I was able to represent the state at the NCAA championships in the past. We used to have meetings there, and then at the NWCA convention. So it was nice to be a mouthpiece for the state and be able to share what was happening here and to bring all of that information back to the state. And so there's a direct tie with that progression from being in the classroom and um, to what I'm doing now. Going to those conventions and meeting, Pat Tossi from the NWCA, who used to be our senior director, and Mike in all of those meetings. And I was tweeting and sharing a lot of that information from those events back to our coaches here in the state. And so I ended up coming on part time for about 18 months, just doing social media and growing that and getting that built up. And then at a certain point, after that, Mike asked if I would be interested in coming on full time. And after some discussion, I wasn't prepared to leave the great state of Kansas. And, we kind of worked it out where I'd be able to do this job remote and do a little bit of traveling with it. But for the most part, I'm here in my office in Ellsworth, Kansas, doing what I need to do to carry the mission of the organization forward.
Yeah, and I don't want to botch your title because when I think of what you do for the NWCA, it's so many different things. You wear many different hats, but communications, marketing, and scholastic coordinator. To the average wrestling fan, I think they all know what the NWCA is and that it exists and that it's Mike Moyer, but I don't think anybody really knows what you're doing or what some of the other NWCA employees are doing behind the scenes and what kind of things go into making so many of these events and really even just the season in general unfold. So talk to us a little bit about, if like I said, I think it would be difficult for you to summarize your entire job description here in the allotted time we have, but maybe talk a little bit about what are some of the main contributions you make kind of as a, like I said, behind the scenes kind of guy at the NWCA.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a small team, but it's mighty. I don't think people truly understand how small of an organization we are,
Yep.
which speaks to the power of the organization. We are a member driven organization. We exist because there are coaches that need coaching development. They need advocates. We have leadership groups, connecting the NAI women with the NAIA and helping them talk about different rules and legislation within each of the governing bodies at the collegiate level, working with the NFHS, just trying to promote the sport. We really advocate on safety. Mike does a lot on trying to grow the sport at, especially the collegiate level,
Yep.
and just the hundreds of programs since he has been on board since I believe 1999.
Yep.
It's great to be a part of that. And so my little part of that is just trying to share the news of, collegiate coaching hires, new programs. Iowa State kept me really busy last week when, announcing the women's program, Dresser becoming the director of wrestling, and, Allie becoming the head coach, Brent becoming the women's coach, Brent becoming the head men's coach. And so just trying to keep up with that, and not just at the Division I level, at the, I don't know if a lot of people realize there's the 3C2A, the
Yep.
community colleges out in California, the NCWA, NAIA, the junior colleges. So we really try and make sure that we are sharing those rankings, those stories, new programs. We really want to make sure that we're letting the wrestling community know about all of those things. The communications and marketing kind of go hand in hand. I take care of the website and the social medias. And then, anytime we have an event, if we need a marketing piece, flyers, handouts, social media graphics, I get to be creative and take care of that. And then, probably the closest to home is, the scholastic director position and working with the state chairs across the country. We started out, I was a state chair, and now I get to work with state chairs. And, my former colleague that was sitting in this role before me, George Way, did a wonderful job,
Yep.
in my time working with him. We saw this split and had boys and girls reps in each state. So not every state has a boys and girls rep at this time, but that's something that we're trying to grow to where we would have 100 state reps. We utilize the NFH's their section map. There's 8 sections in the NFHS, and so we just adopted that. And so I have 8 section leaders that I work with, and they kind of work within their section with those state chairs. And so, earlier this morning I ran an export. We had all of our state coach of the year nominations for the boys and girls head coaches of the year, and then the boys and girls assistant staff of the year. And so then I will work with state chairs and the section leaders to come up with our section winners. And then ultimately we will have our national winners. And so it's just every day is different. I never
Yep.
get bored. And I just, like I said, using all of those different tools as a technology instructor, as a business teacher. And like I said, I feel really grateful for when I get to work with the coaches. There are times when I feel a little bit removed.
Yeah.
When you're working with those athletes and you're putting an arm around them and you're lifting them up, and you can see the growth and the changes in them, through if you get them in 7th grade, through senior year, that's, 6 years with them. So there's times when I do miss that, but then I reflect, and my wife helps me with that too. But I realize that, if I'm working with more coaches, I'm working with more kids, and that
Right.
kind of it
It's a
increases
trickle
your
down effect.
reach.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And so I don't ever take that lightly. And I truly appreciate getting to work with those coaches because, every coach is in a different situation.
Yeah.
I was in small town 321A, Kansas in the smallest classification. The majority of my career was spent at a little 1A school with less than 100 kids in it. My situation is different than an inner city coach versus a suburban coach, and that all changes by state. And so
Yep.
it's really great to talk to the section leaders and the state chairs and find out what is happening across the country, because every year I learn something new that state association does different. And so it's fun to be able to share that information, and hopefully, we can find the best parts of that and they can take it back and make it work, and improve wrestling in their state.
Yeah. Yep, for sure. And everything that you just named as a job responsibility that you have, I was thinking in my head as you were speaking was if you're not a journalist, then I don't know what is anymore because I mean everything that you said, it's like I guess the best way I could in layman's terms, summarize your role is you're kind of like an SID, but not just for, it's enough of a job to be an SID for, I did it at Old Dominion for 2 years, to be an SID for just one program and their athletic, one athletic team even. You're an SID essentially for every college wrestling program, men and women's team in the entire country across every division. Constantly, every day, I'm getting tagged on Twitter or I'm seeing on the news feed, a new program got announced or a new coach, there's an opening, or this all academic All America team just came out, or that's all you. And I think people don't necessarily realize that. I guess my biggest question for you is, I feel like I've got enough on my plate here as a journalist for Win, but we just have a 60 to 80 page magazine coming out once a month. How are you able to, I guess, output that volume of work and be kind of like the overseeing, I guess, like, I don't know, grandfather SID of every college wrestling team in America? That's kind of how I see your job.
Well, I'm truly blessed to get to work with so many great SIDs across the country. The sports information directors, that is truly a lot of times a thankless task. I get to sit with them
Yeah.
at some of the national championships, and some of them don't have assistants. They're in a athletic department that might have 30 sports.
Yeah.
They're trying to cover all of those athletes, do media days, and doing their best. And so, all I have to do is take what they send me and repackage it and push it
Yeah.
out. So I can't take too much credit. I'm very thankful to the work that they do. The offices, the conferences across the country do a wonderful job. When we're seeing different conferences, wrestling as a sport, as a championship within their league, that's great. When they share that stuff to me, I can help promote that. And we get that ball rolling downhill and we all work together, and I think it's a great thing. So There's a lot, a lot of times I find myself in the evening not being able to put my phone down as I'm, it's not doom scrolling, but it's definitely scrolling through
Yeah.
there, trying to make sure that I didn't miss something. And,
Yep.
I always feel bad if, find out like a week later that, a coach got hired or a new program got added. So
Yep.
just really try and stay tuned in with everything. And then, like you mentioned earlier, I love getting to work, with different outlets and different personalities and trying to tag everybody to kind of amplify the message. And, it's really interesting and great to be able to do that. And, when other organizations tag us on stuff too, that really helps share the information.
Yeah. Yep. Certainly. Um, one of my favorite stories just happened a couple months ago. And I wanted to ask you about this is, we were at the NWCA. Oh man, it's a mouthful to say the whole event's
It
name. I'm
is.
probably going to butcher it, but the NWCA multi-division national dual meet championships or something of that nature out in at the Unidome. And there's first time I had been to it in years, at least especially since it's been to this capacity with this many teams and this many programs across so many mats. But anyway, we're running back and forth, across what was it, 28 mats or so, trying to catch a glimpse of every division, trying to see what the big stories are, and hear the crowd cheering. You got to run over there and see. But through all of that, I think you were at the head table, seated with most of the time like this, typing with your head in the computer, and to be at an event of that magnitude and that's cool. You obviously had so much work going on. How are you able to kind of balance the workload of all the work that needs to be done, but also being able to, occasionally try to look up and be like, hey, I'm lucky I get to work full time in wrestling and I had a front row seat to some of the best wrestlers in the country right here.
Yeah, that the national duels are it's a lot. If you haven't ever been,
It's a monster.
to
Yeah.
the listeners out there, definitely want to check it out sometime. I can't really describe it. We fill up the Unidome.
Yeah.
There's no extra room on the floor there. So
Yeah.
as far as getting to take in a lot of matches, I think I may have watched one or two matches the whole time. It's really hard to focus on the good things. You try and like, okay, I got this out. We did this. We shared this information, because I could beat myself up all day about all the stuff that I didn't do, the highlight videos that didn't get made, or
Yeah.
the Instagram posts. And, you just want to do the best to share your story. And there are some great media organizations that are there covering it. And so I think what I try and do is just leverage, outlets like, yourselves and Flow Wrestling to try and share that message, because I don't have the bandwidth to do that. And so that's probably the biggest thing getting over through the years, was starting out and going to like the national champion, the Division 1 men's championships, and trying to push stuff out and like trying to compare it to the NCAA or
Yeah.
ESPN. And it's like they've got entire teams and they've got
Exactly.
interns. And so I've had some different people that have volunteered to snag some videos and make some reels and send them to me so I can post them. And so I truly appreciate that. There's just like I mentioned earlier, there's just such a great community in the sport. And so I'm very fortunate to get to work with them and get to witness their creative product that they're able to put out, and just kind of pigtail on top of that. So just very appreciative of everybody that helps do it. We've got a great team. That's all hands on deck. We
Yep.
might be mopping mats or picking up trash or, refilling the green beans back in the coach's hospitality room. So at any given minute, you're going to be doing something, mission critical. But
Yeah.
that's no different than when I was hosting a junior high scramble.
Yep.
You got to take care of the coaches that are in attendance, take care of your officials, and just try and have your athletes have the best space that they can to go out and perform and put on a show. So you
Yeah.
really trying to think about everybody that's in that building, whether it's the SIDs and coaches or the fans in the stands. But we do have a good group of people that I work with, and they care about the sport, and they're all coming from different experiences, and so I think we blend very well together.
Yeah. For sure, for sure. I thought, I saw Dan Weaver back there in the hospitality room
Yeah,
several times. I thought he was the green bean guy, but maybe he was just eating. I don't know.
he may have been.
Yeah, yeah. He's also a valuable team member there, whether he's doing the green beans or taping the mats together, whatever it is. So I had to give Dan a shout out. But Nate, I'm going to put you on the spot real quick. Last question or two for you.
Okay.
There's probably many things that come to mind, and maybe some that don't. But favorite part about your role with the NWCA, like we talked about, you're kind of almost like a poster boy in my mind of somebody who had a bunch of different work experience that there's no way of seeing where you're going to end up someday, but it seems like all of your past experience kind of rolled into one, all seem to have served a purpose in a way that now, you've kind of alluded to in this interview, it's all kind of culminated to benefit you now in your current role. What would you say is your favorite thing about getting to work for the NWCA?
Man, there's so many great things. Getting to, the relationships with my coworkers, with the coaches around the country, getting to focus on the sport, you know, being able to be a generalist. And I always fought, I did so many things as a teacher and coach. Coached year round. I was a football defensive coordinator, junior high and high school wrestling coach, baseball coach, American Legion baseball coach, summer weights coordinator, mowing the football field, the baseball field. It was one of
All
those things
thankless jobs.
yeah, but they needed to get
They
done,
need it
so you
done.
do
Yep.
them.
Yep.
Right. I always worried about not necessarily being great at anything, but I found that being a generalist is pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
And the more if I could talk to, everybody out there, whether, thinking about future careers, we think about the specialist and the 10,000 hour rule and just focusing on one thing. I think I've been blessed by being able to do so many different things, and especially as a business teacher, all of the different things that covers marketing, technology, graphic design, photography, videography. I'm not great at any of those things. I truly don't feel that, but I'm good, and I have kind of the Swiss Army knife.
Yeah.
I can do a little of pretty
Utility
much
guy.
everything.
Yeah.
Yes. And so I think that I would encourage people to, be okay with being a generalist,
Yeah.
because I think if you're okay with that, it opens you up to continue to grow. But, you're going to probably continue to evolve everybody's roles, especially, with AI and technology. You're not going to do the same thing in 10 years, 20 years that you're doing now. So
Yeah.
if you are a generalist and you haven't spent all that time specializing in something that might have, you know, uh,
A
a
limited future.
time frame,
Yeah.
yeah, limited future where
Mhm.
the clock's ticking on it,
Yeah.
you're able to transition and go with that. So I know that I didn't tell you any one thing, but if I did that, I would leave something, off that's important. But
Yeah. No.
I just very blessed, and just being able to, work with you, Tristan, work with Win, you and Brian, you guys and your team do such a great job covering the sport. And so it's truly, great to get up every day and do what I get to do.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and it's likewise like I was kind of alluding to earlier as you being almost like the SID over everybody. I've even found and part of the reason why you were a name that came to my mind and Brian's mind when we thought about this award this year is I've just found my job in a little bit similar way to yours when I go to compile these magazines, especially when we got things like the postseason NCAA issue, for example, or whatever it may be. There's certain times of the year where there's just so much stuff that goes on, and it's like it's almost overwhelming to sit there and look at our 80-page grid and think, how am I going to get 80 pages worth of content in this magazine? Like, where do I even begin? Or tackling something like the NWCA National Duels, and I'm like, where do I even start? Well, a lot of times I find myself coming back to the things you've posted, the things you've shared, your articles, and you have, NWCA, you have a release for every single division and highlights and the scores and the winners and the OW. And it's like, wow, that's a great place to start. So I just want to say thank you to you for that because you make our job a lot easier and a lot more efficient. But the last thing I wanted to ask you too, Nate, and we kind of talked about before we started recording here was, the way that people can support the NWCA more, looking big picture. I know you guys have the annual NWCA Coaches Convention, which this year has moved up to Baltimore, so a little bit closer to me in Pennsylvania. It's been in Florida the past couple of years, but It seems like I've never been able to make it. Hopefully soon I will. It seems like a really cool event, but maybe just spend a minute or two talking about, what is the NWCA annual convention? Who should be there, or who can benefit from it? I guess just talk a little bit about what that experience is like, and what the benefit it is to the average wrestling coach out there that maybe could find themselves coming in there one of these years.
Yeah, absolutely. The NWCA convention is such a great event. I went for years before even becoming an employee.
Yeah.
I learned so many things, and it truly levels everything down to where you're just wrestling people. I remember sitting at a breakfast with Mark Cody when he was at Oklahoma, and
Yeah.
he had been and done our KWCA clinic a couple of years before, and I'm sitting beside a D1 coach, and I'm at a little tiny high school with less than 100 kids in it.
Yeah.
And he started asking me about my program, and we got to talking about wrestling. And so it's a little surreal to be able to just like kind of shut things down for 3 days, and it's just the wrestling world. And
Yep.
they're just wrestling people, and you can fanboy a little bit and kind of geek out and be like, oh man, I watched this coach coaching the national finals, growing up, or, a lot of them, you watch them wrestle and now they've
Yeah.
transitioned into coaching. But it's just a great place where people can go sit and have conversations. Yes, we have presentations, but I've always found that the presentations are great and you can take notes and you can download the PowerPoints. And I encourage people to do that. But a lot of times it's those conversations that happen, before the session starts, after the session, setting out a breakfast or a lunch,
Yeah.
at night, at the hotel pool or whatever. And you make those connections, you build your network. And I know for me, a lot of times I had, imposter syndrome as a young coach, thinking, oh man, like these people they're just on another level. And then,
Yeah.
I joined my state association and I'm sitting on the board and I'm learning from these coaches. And I'm like, I'm doing that. I'm running that drill. Like more than anything, it was like validation. And so if
Yeah.
you're a young coach and, maybe you feel the way that I felt, it's great to just go and be validated in what you are doing. Because at the end of the day, if you're being a transformational coach and you're investing in the lives of your athletes, if you're loving them and holding them accountable, you're doing the job. The
Yep.
the technique, you can take care of the technique, but it's all of those different things. And just being able to, when you feel confident as a coach, I think your athletes feel that. And so I would truly invite anybody that has a whistle around their neck and they're in the wrestling room working with athletes, come show up at the convention. It's a great experience. We have a lot of college coaches. We're really trying to grow our high school coaching attendance. Um, Hopefully moving it a little farther north. We'll see. You mentioned we've been in Florida for quite a while, and we're going to move it north and see what happens in Baltimore. And it's a very strong wrestling tradition
Yep.
within that radius of Baltimore itself. So there's a lot of college programs. There's a lot of really strong scholastic programs, and so we really look forward to growing it. We usually got between 400 and 500 coaches there. And as we're able to grow that and we hit 500 and then we hit 600 and, if we can break 1,000, that changes everything. Economies of scale, put my business teacher hat on, it allows us to do some different things and unlock some different venues, maybe some
Yeah.
different cities that we wouldn't be able to have access to with our current size. So I just encourage everybody to think about coming. And, if you've got some other coaches in your conference, in your league, in your area, carpool, if you're
Yep.
drivable distance with Baltimore, come show up, see what it's all about. Our biggest thing is once we get people there, they typically come back. And we see the same faces over and over and over again. So, we're working. We've got a great convention committee. That's something that we've done this year. We really wanted to have the coaches that are actually attending the convention. We wanted to build it from the bottom up. them to address, the needs and the topics that they need to get better at. They need to have more information in. And so I'm very thankful to that committee that have been meeting, probably for the last 6 months, putting this together. And I really think that it's going to help us quite a bit, going forward, leaning on this committee, having the coaches build it and really wanting to step up and be a part of the convention instead of trying to, for us in the office to think that we can anticipate everything that they need to know and what will help them. We're not going to get very far. So
Hmm.
again, I just want to circle back to the fact that we are a member driven organization and our members are everything. So at the
Yep.
end of the day, I'm in customer service.
Yeah.
And my customers are the coaches around the country. And so if they need something, they want something, we're going to do what we can to get it for them.
Yeah. That's awesome. Add it to your list of hats that you wear.
Yes.
Um, I was gonna say so many of the coaches I've interviewed just in my two years now full time with Win and 7 years before that as just a freelancer have spoken so highly about the NWCA convention and they've all talked about kind of similar to what you said. It wasn't necessarily just one or two things that they learned there. It was a lot about just seeing guys that they've looked up to their whole life as coaches or as athletes that they learned something from or got validated by or whatever it may be. So what are the dates of it and how are people able to still sign up? Is it still open for this summer?
Absolutely. Yep. It'll be open right up
Okay,
until the convention goes. Uh, the full convention is July 31st through August 2nd
that's right.
at the Inner Harbor in
Yep,
Baltimore. We're at
nice
the
area,
Renaissance there. It
beautiful.
seems to be a great area.
Yeah.
We've got some deals that we're working on with. We've already got a discount at the National Museum there, or the aquarium. We're working on getting some tickets to. I think it's the Orioles and the Phillies are going to be in town, so we're trying to get an excursion out to the ballpark. Maybe we can see Mike Moyer throughout the first pitch.
Oh, that'd be incredible.
I
Worth
would
the
pay good
worth the
money to see
worth the
that.
trip.
Right,
Yeah, worth the
the whole
trip.
trip. See
Yeah.
Mike out there, throwing out the first pitch.
Oh yeah.
So we're really trying to make it family friendly. It's not the beach, but there are things there. There's
Oh yeah.
attractions. There's
Inner
food.
Harbor's a really nice area
Yes.
for sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we're excited about that. The night before, on the 30th, we're going to have a social. We'll have everybody can come pick up their credentials. They can obviously get them the day of, but
Yeah.
it's really nice to have our vendor social there, our exhibitor social, just for everybody to come in if they're in town already to get together, kind of break bread and have some fellowship. Before that, we've got the Collegiate Leadership Academy, so we're going to have all of our coaches that are going through that. They're going to be there a couple days leading up. We're going to have a Scholastic Leadership Academy that's free for the high school coaches. They can come attend that the day before.
Okay. So kind
So,
of butted up
any
against each other. Yeah.
right, we just try and build it up, put as much gravity to it as we can.
Yeah.
The bigger we make it, the more people will feel that they need to be there. They can everybody can go check out our website. It's nwcaconvention.com. You can go ahead, buy your registrations there. There's lodging. We've got some links there with information on Visit Baltimore, so you can see some of the attractions there. So if anybody has any questions, they can reach out to our office. Anybody on staff can speak to the convention and the benefits of it, the technique sessions, the nutrition sessions, the sleep sessions, whatever we have. We haven't finalized the schedule, and we'll be putting that out. We'll be putting out our keynote speakers. We'll be dripping that out as we continue to get through the spring and into early summer. So I just encourage everybody to come. It's hard to beat. You get a lot for a $400 registration fee.
Yeah.
So we
Absolutely.
hope to see everybody there in the Inner Harbor.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Nate, I took at least double, maybe triple of the amount of time that I promised you I would take on this interview. So I really appreciate you stopping by with us and doing this interview. Again, want to congratulate you on being named WIN's 2026 Journalist of the Year. And I think, if nothing else, by the end of this talk, we've established that you are a journalist by many stretches of the imagination. So thanks again for all that you do for wrestling. You're definitely one of the most I would say, best examples of a person I know who, does a very thankless job, but doesn't seek any kind of recognition for it. So now that the wrestling world maybe has a name to a face, if you see Nate Naasz on Media Row at any of these big events, stop by and say hi. And we thank you again, and keep up all the great work that you do, not just for the organization, but just growing the sport as a whole.
Thank you, Tristan. It's very appreciated. It's something that I will honor now and going forward.
Awesome. Take care, Nate.
Thanks, Tristan.